Billionaire Arab insulted Waitress. Translate this and my salary is yours. Froze when rain hammered against the tall glass windows of Lux Meridian Hotel, the kind of place where billionaires whispered deals that changed entire continents. But behind its gold-lined curtains and marble pillars stood Lena, a 23-year-old black waitress with a soft voice, tired shoes, and a smile she forced even when life felt unbearably heavy. Tonight was one of the busiest nights of the year, an international summit attended by Saudi royals, oil tycoons, and diplomats. The kind of crowd where a waitress could lose her job over a single misplaced glass. Lena kept her head down, focusing on the trays she carried, ignoring the sting in her knees from double shifts and the fear that this job was all she had left. Then he walked in, tall, impeccably dressed, surrounded by bodyguards. Sheikh Amir al-Rashid, a billionaire whose name shook the markets like a desert sandstorm. His presence alone made the room freeze. When Lena accidentally brushed past him while trying to avoid a broken glass on the floor, he snapped around sharply. "Watch where you walk," he barked in Arabic, assuming she wouldn't understand. His entourage laughed. Then he leaned forward with a smirk. "Translate this and my salary is yours." The room went dead silent. His bodyguards watched her like she was an insect. Guests turned their heads. Even the hotel manager stared, ready to fire her on the spot. Lena's hands trembled. They expected her to cry, to apologize, to shrink. But then Lena lifted her head slowly, her eyes calm, steady, almost knowing. She spoke. And in that moment, the billionaire froze like someone had unplugged the world. Because she didn't just translate his sentence. She repeated something he hadn't heard in 12 long years, something only one person ever said to him before they died. The Lux Meridian Hotel sparkled under a chandelier worth more than Lena's yearly salary. Its marble floors reflected every hurried step of waiters who knew that tonight was not a night to make mistakes. The International Economic Gala brought together men whose decisions could change oil markets, global currencies, even political alliances. In a place like this, a waitress wasn't a person, she was a potential liability. Lena breathed slowly as she balanced a tray of crystal glasses on her palm. She had been working double shifts for weeks, trying to cover her brother's medical bills. Her feet ached, her back screamed, but she didn't have the luxury to rest. Every shift was a battle, and survival meant keeping her head down, smiling through exhaustion, and avoiding any wealthy ego with the power to ruin her life with a word. But luck wasn't always kind. A glass shattered somewhere near the far table, and guests turned in annoyance. As Lena maneuvered around the broken shards, her elbow brushed lightly against a passing man. She didn't see him, only felt the sudden change in the air. Conversations died. Music dissolved. It was as if the entire hall inhaled and held its breath. She turned and froze. Standing before her was Sheikh Amir al-Rashid, one of the wealthiest Arab businessmen in the world. His tailored thobe was pristine white, contrasted by a dark cloak embroidered with gold. His eyes, sharp, unreadable, commanding, felt like they could cut through walls. People didn't just make way for him, they made distance. Even diplomats bowed respectfully when he passed. And Lena had bumped into him. A mistake that could cost her everything. Amir's expression hardened. His entourage, for men in immaculate suits, stopped behind him, observing her like she was dust on their master's shoes. He muttered something in Arabic under his breath, a phrase laced with annoyance. The men behind him chuckled. He assumed she wouldn't understand. To him, she was just a waitress, someone invisible, someone beneath him. And then the insult came. He leaned forward slightly, amusement edging his tone. "Translate this and my salary is yours." The hall fell silent. Some guests looked away, pretending they hadn't heard. Others stared, waiting for drama. The hotel manager's eyes widened in horror, already calculating the PR disaster. He mouthed at Lena to apologize now, before she cost them their biggest client of the night. Her heart hammered. She felt the sting of humiliation crawling up her throat. The words weren't just arrogant, they cut deep, brushing old wounds she kept hidden. A lesser person might have cried. Another might have begged. But something in Lena, something bruised yet unbroken, lifted her chin. Her tray lowered slowly. Her hands steadied. And when she looked at him, her eyes held something unexpected, calm. Not submission, not fear. Calm. A soft, steady breath escaped her lips. Then she spoke, in flawless, elegant, melodic Arabic. "Alitaram luga yafamuha kol kalb. Kalbuka nasiya." Respect is a language every heart understands. Yours has forgotten it. A collective gasp rippled across the ballroom. One of the entourage men stumbled a step. Someone dropped a fork. Even the orchestra faltered on a note. But the person most affected was Amir. His face drained of color. His eyes widened, not in anger, but in shock so raw it looked almost painful. The arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by something hollow, disbelieving. For a moment, he wasn't a billionaire surrounded by bodyguards. He was lost. He whispered, barely audible, impossible. Because the way she spoke, her pronunciation, her tone, even the soft lilt at the end of her sentence, was identical to someone he had buried 12 years ago. His mother. No one had spoken Arabic to him in that exact way since the woman who raised him, guided him, and died in his arms when he was just a boy. Hearing it again, here from a stranger, felt like a ghost had reached out and touched his heart. The manager came rushing over, panic etched into every wrinkle on his face. Lena, apologize this instant. Sheikh Amir, sir, she didn't mean. You're fired, he barked at her, reaching for her arm. But before he could touch her, Amir snapped out of his trance. His voice thundered across the hall. She does not move. Everyone, including Lena, froze. Amir stepped closer to her, eyes burning with questions and memories he couldn't yet understand. The hall watched as the powerful billionaire, feared across continents, struggled to find words. Finally, in a low voice meant only for her, he said, "You, come with me. Now." The room held its breath as Lena, trembling but unbowed, followed him out of the ballroom, leaving behind broken glass, stunned guests, and a manager who suddenly looked like he might get fired instead. A door closed behind them. What happened next would change both of their lives. The private elevator ride to Amir's suite felt impossibly long. Lena's hands were clammy, her heart hammering against her ribcage like a drum warning of war. She had faced rude guests, rich bullies, and even her own fears countless times, but this, standing face to face with Sheikh Amir al-Rashid, was a level of intensity she had never imagined. The air smelled faintly of oud and leather, a fragrance that carried power and wealth in every molecule. When the elevator doors slid open, Amir led her into a suite that could have been a palace in miniature. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed the city's glittering skyline, yet Lena barely noticed. She was acutely aware of him, of the storm in his eyes, the same storm she had glimpsed in the ballroom, now tinged with confusion and something softer, almost vulnerable. Amir gestured toward a plush armchair near the corner of the room. "Sit," he commanded, though there was no edge to his voice now, only curiosity. Lena obeyed, setting her tray aside carefully, her knees trembling. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the city lights, but speaking to her as though she were the only person in the world. "I need to know something," he said finally, his voice quiet, almost unsteady. Where did you learn to speak Arabic like that? That phrase that," he hesitated, swallowing hard, "is exactly what my mother used to say." Lena's chest tightened. She had expected disbelief, anger, maybe even mockery. But this was different. There was something human in his voice, a crack in the armor that wealth and power had built around him. She took a steadying breath. "I lived in Riyadh for 6 years when I was a child," she admitted softly. "My adoptive mother taught me classical Arabic, manners, words, expressions of respect. I repeat what she taught me, because she said words are bridges between hearts." Amir turned sharply, his eyes narrowing slightly, searching hers for truth. 6 years. His voice was almost a whisper, disbelief mixing with curiosity. You must have been very young." "Yes," Lena nodded. "I was 8 when I moved there. I learned everything she could teach me while she was alive. My father died when I was very young, and she became my family. She always said, 'Lena, never forget, love begins with dignity, and dignity begins with respect.'" Her voice trembled faintly, carrying a fragility that only made it stronger. Amir sank into a leather chair opposite her, his fingers drumming lightly on his armrest. He was quiet for a moment, as though listening to ghosts only he could hear. "It is her exact phrase," he said finally, his tone distant. "I have not heard it in 12 years, not since she," his throat tightened, words failing him. He exhaled sharply. How could you know that?" Lena met his gaze, steady, unwavering. "Because I learned to listen," she said softly. "Because some words are too important to forget, even if the person who taught them is gone. And because respect, true respect, speaks louder than money or fear. That phrase, it is alive in me, just as it was alive in her. Amir blinked rapidly, the rigid, unyielding man from the ballroom, now appearing vulnerable, human. He rose and walked to a side table, pouring himself a small glass of water, but not drinking it. You remind me of her," he admitted, almost to himself. "The way you speak, the way you hold yourself. I shouldn't be saying this, but it's uncanny." Lena felt a strange mix of fear and calm. The power dynamic in the room had shifted. She was no longer a trembling waitress. She was a bridge to something Amir had lost long ago, a memory that no amount of money could buy back. Her hands rested on her lap, unclenching slowly as she realized that for the first time, she had the chance to speak to him not as a servant, but as a human being. Amir sank back into his chair, staring at her with intensity, softened by something almost like remorse. You didn't flinch in front of me tonight," he said quietly, his eyes searching hers. "Most people would have apologized, coward, but you," he broke off, shaking his head. "You have courage. And a wisdom. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Lena replied softly. "Sometimes words are meant to heal, not humiliate. And sometimes they are meant to remind someone of who they really are." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the city below was the only sound, a reminder that life went on outside this small, charged room. Finally, Amir exhaled and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Tonight," he said, his voice firmer now, "you will serve only my table. No one else. And no one touches you without my permission. Do you understand?" Lena blinked, surprised at the offer. I understand, sir." He stood abruptly, pacing near the window. "And know this," he added, almost as an afterthought, no one has ever spoken to me the way you just did. I am not used to that. I am not used to being reminded that perhaps I have forgotten how to respect, how to feel." His voice softened, edged with guilt. "Do not let anyone else see what just happened. It is ours." Lena nodded, feeling a strange warmth in her chest, a mix of relief, curiosity, and cautious hope. Something inside Amir had shifted tonight, and she could feel it as surely as she felt her own pulse. As she left his private suite to return to the ballroom, a new understanding passed silently between them. She had not only survived an insult, but had reminded a billionaire of humanity, memory, and respect. And for the first time in her life, Lena realized that maybe, just maybe, the world held more than cruelty for her. It held the possibility of connection, even in the most unexpected places. The ballroom had regained a fragile calm after the incident in the private suite, but tension still lingered like a static charge in the air. Lena returned to her duties, her tray balanced with precision, her mind replaying Amir's words from their meeting. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps the billionaire's anger had softened, not entirely gone, but restrained, tempered by curiosity, and something deeper she couldn't yet name. The tables were bustling with ministers, diplomats, and business magnates, their voices a low hum of polite chatter. Lena's eyes scanned the crowd for Amir, who had taken his place at the head table, commanding attention without needing to speak. She noticed the subtle ways people deferred to him, the subtle bow of a head, the careful avoidance of eye contact. But amidst this sea of deference, a storm was quietly brewing. A tall, sharp-featured man in a dark suit approached Amir's table. The crowd shifted slightly to make space, sensing confrontation before it even began. Lena recognized him immediately. Minister Karel Novak, a foreign diplomat notorious for his biting sarcasm and subtle humiliation of rivals. He had a reputation for knowing exactly how to provoke someone into revealing weakness, and tonight, Amir was the target. "Ah, Sheikh Amir," Novak said, his voice smooth, almost buttery, but carrying the unmistakable sting of mockery. "I hear your recent ventures in the Gulf were less than successful. Truly remarkable that such a leader can maintain appearances while the markets crumble around him." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that left no doubt about the cruelty behind the words. Amir's jaw tightened. The tension in the room shifted immediately. Ministers and guests exchanged uneasy glances. It was expected. He was a billionaire, a man of influence, but they had never seen him publicly provoke this way. Amir's usual instinct was swift and decisive, but tonight he paused, eyes flickering to Lena. "You," Amir began, his voice measured but cool, "translate this." Lena's heart skipped. She had expected that command, but what she didn't expect was the choice she had in that moment. Amir was giving her the power to either humiliate or protect. She looked at Novak, who raised a brow, clearly anticipating an insulting translation to be unleashed. Lena took a breath, steadying herself. She did not stumble. She did not panic. And she did not insult. Instead, she chose her words with care, speaking slowly and deliberately in perfect English. The hall hushed, waiting to hear what she would say. "He says your leadership has been admired," she said softly. The words hung in the air, a gentle deflection, a shield rather than a sword. Novak's eyes widened in confusion, his lips twitching as if trying to form a retort, but no words came immediately. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, sensing that the insult they had expected had been replaced with something diplomatic, respectful, and yet, oddly, powerful. "You what?" Novak stammered, his face flushing red. "You are supposed to translate everything." "I did," Lena replied calmly, placing her tray down carefully on the side. "And in doing so, I chose to respect both parties. Words can wound, or they can mend. Tonight, I choose the latter." The room erupted into murmurs. Diplomats whispered among themselves, some impressed, others incredulous. Amir, for the first time, allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. He glanced at Lena, eyes sharp but filled with respect, recognizing not just her skill, but her courage. Novak's anger was now palpable. He leaned forward, attempting to regain control. "Do you always decide which words to speak based on morality? Who are you to interpret my words?" Lena did not flinch. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze directly. "I speak 5 languages fluently," she said, her tone quiet but firm. "I understand your words in every possible sense. And I still choose to speak truthfully, without unnecessary cruelty." The minister faltered. The subtle arrogance he wielded as a weapon dissolved in the presence of a woman who was neither afraid nor overawed by wealth or title. Lena's voice had an authority that transcended the room's social hierarchy, and for the first time, people noticed not just the billionaire but the woman beside him, guiding, protecting, translating, and yet commanding attention on her own terms. Amir cleared his throat and finally spoke, his voice low but forceful. "Enough, minister. She is correct. Your words are intended to wound. I do not permit my table to be used as a stage for petty humiliation. Leave us." The command stunned Novak. He opened his mouth, hesitated, and then, realizing Amir's seriousness, bowed stiffly and backed away. The bodyguards moved slightly, reinforcing the space, while guests watched the power dynamic shift dramatically. Amir, who had once been untouchable because of wealth and influence, now appeared human in his judgment, yet formidable in his protection. Lena exhaled quietly, feeling the adrenaline ebb. Amir turned to her, eyes softening. "You could have humiliated him," he said quietly, almost to himself, "but you didn't. You've changed how I see my own power." She smiled faintly, a mix of relief and satisfaction. "Sometimes," she replied softly, "true strength is knowing when to speak and when not to." The tension lifted slightly, but the incident had left a mark. Amir now looked at her not as a mere waitress, not as someone beneath his notice, but as an equal in courage and wisdom. And Lena, for the first time in her life, felt that respect could exist even in a world defined by wealth, arrogance, and power. The ballroom's chaos had faded into memory, replaced by a quiet corridor leading to Amir's private suite. Lena followed at a careful distance, her senses heightened. There was a different weight to Amir tonight, a vulnerability that was foreign to the man who commanded billions, influence, and fear. His usual confidence had softened into something almost fragile, like glass held in trembling hands. Once inside, Amir gestured for Lena to sit. She obeyed silently, feeling the gravity of the moment settle over them. For the first time, she wasn't merely a waitress in a gilded hall. She was a confidant to a man whose life seemed enviable on the surface, but harbored a profound, unseen emptiness. Amir moved to a leather chair by the window and sank into it, staring out at the city lights with an intensity that suggested he was looking for someone he would never find. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "I lost my mother when I was 14. The words landed with surprising heaviness, soft but full of raw emotion. Lena's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected him to reveal such personal pain, not after the arrogance he displayed earlier. "My father had been distant, business always first," he continued, voice barely above a whisper. "And when she died, I felt the world crumble. I learned to be cold, to hide any trace of weakness. To show respect for life's fragility is dangerous, I thought. Better to command fear than risk compassion. Lena studied him silently. She saw the tight lines of his jaw, the shadow behind his eyes, and the weight of grief that still clung to him despite the years. Carefully, she spoke, her voice gentle but unwavering. "Pain is loud when kindness goes silent," she said. Amir's gaze snapped toward her, surprise etched across his features. For a moment, he seemed almost disoriented, as though hearing that truth aloud had unbalanced him. His lips trembled, threatening tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed in over a decade. He swallowed hard, eyes darting away to the cityscape beyond the window, fighting the vulnerability that Lena's words had unearthed. You understand?" he asked, voice raw, uncertain. "I understand loss," Lena replied softly, "and the way it can make a person forget who they are. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Sometimes it takes a stranger, a witness, someone who sees beyond wealth or power, to remind you that kindness is not weakness." Amir leaned back in his chair, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. His hand absently reached for a glass of water, but he didn't drink, lost instead in thoughts he hadn't shared with anyone. "Most people," he murmured, "would have cowered tonight. You could have apologized, lowered your eyes, but you didn't. You reminded me of her." Her heart ached at the mention of his mother, the woman whose memory had shaped him, yet whose absence had hardened his heart. "I only repeated what she taught me," Lena said softly. "Words matter, Amir. They echo in the hearts of those who hear them, sometimes long after they are spoken." He nodded slowly, as though committing every syllable to memory. After a moment, his expression shifted into something unexpected, an offer, tentative yet sincere. "I want you as my personal translator," he said, his voice steady now, but tinged with a rare warmth. "A salary 20 times what you earn tonight. You would have protection, respect, and freedom in your work. I want someone who sees people the way you do." Lena blinked, taken aback. The offer was more than generous, it was life-changing. Her mind raced, briefly imagining the doors it could open, the security it could provide. But as quickly as the thought arose, she pushed it aside. I cannot accept," she said quietly, her gaze lowered, voice trembling with the weight of unspoken reasons. Amir's eyes widened, disbelief etched across his features. "Why not?" he asked, stepping closer, urgency lacing his tone. "This is an incredible opportunity. You could leave your struggles behind, your worries, your everything." Lena swallowed, gathering her courage. "I have responsibilities," she admitted softly, finally meeting his gaze. "My younger brother, he is very ill. He depends on me entirely. If I leave, even for a chance like this, he has no one. I cannot abandon him, no matter what you offer. Money cannot replace me in his life." Amir's expression shifted from surprise to realization, then softened into something almost tender. The arrogance, the billionaire persona, melted slightly in the presence of genuine sacrifice. He had seen wealth solve almost every problem, but this was different. Here was a woman whose courage and devotion transcended money, whose heart held loyalty stronger than ambition. For a moment, neither spoke. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the city beyond. Amir finally sank back into his chair, processing what she had said. His mind raced, not with business deals or investments, but with the fragile, human truth of sacrifice and love. "You," he murmured almost to himself, "are extraordinary." Lena allowed herself a small, tired smile. "I just do what I must," she said. "Sometimes that's enough to survive. Sometimes it's enough to remind others that life is not only about power, Amir." The billionaire nodded slowly, absorbing the words, understanding now the depth of her courage, her wisdom, and the invisible strength that had shaken him earlier that night. He realized that this woman, this waitress who refused to bow, who spoke with respect, who protected him even as she risked her own safety, was teaching him something far more valuable than any deal, contract, or market maneuver. She was teaching him about humanity, vulnerability, and the strength of a heart that loves fiercely. The next morning, the hotel felt strangely quiet. The gala had ended hours ago, but its echoes still lingered in the hallways, the whispers, the cautious glances, the memory of a waitress who had dared to stand tall before a billionaire. Lena walked through the service corridor, carrying trays with her usual practice calm, but her mind was elsewhere. Last night's events with Amir replayed constantly, looping through her thoughts like a song she couldn't forget. She paused by a small break room, the hum of the refrigerator offering a brief moment of solitude. Her hands trembled slightly as she removed her apron, and she allowed herself a quiet sigh. The weight she carried every day, the long shifts, the endless demands of customers, the invisible scrutiny of wealth and power, was heavy enough. But the heaviest burden was always waiting for her at home, her younger brother, Yusuf. Yusuf was only 10 years old, but the illness that had plagued him for years had aged him far beyond his age. Lena had sacrificed everything to pay for his treatments, often going without food or sleep to ensure he had the medicine, therapy, and care he needed. Every paycheck she earned went straight to the hospital, leaving nothing for herself. And yet, she refused to leave him, even for the opportunity Amir had offered her, a salary beyond her wildest dreams, freedom, and prestige. The thought of leaving Yusuf alone, even briefly, tightened her chest with unbearable guilt. "He needs me," she whispered to herself. "I can't abandon him, not now, not ever." Amir, however, could not let the matter rest. The night before had shaken him in ways he had not expected. He had seen courage, dignity, and resilience in Lena, but there was something more, something she was hiding. Determined to understand, he decided to see for himself. Disguised in a simple jacket and leaving his entourage behind, he visited the local hospital where Yusuf had been admitted. The moment he stepped inside, Amir's breath caught. The hospital was modest, understaffed, and clearly underfunded. Equipment was outdated, rooms were cramped, and children with serious conditions lined the ward. He walked slowly, observing the care being administered, and then he saw her, the boy with dark eyes, frail and pale, lying on a bed with a small pile of worn toys beside him. Yusuf looked up as Amir approached, squinting through his tired eyes. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously. "Are you the man who made my sister sad?" Amir froze. His heart clenched. This innocent child, so small, had somehow learned that the wealthy man standing before him had caused pain to his sister. And in a way, he had. The truth of his arrogance, the weight of his earlier dismissal, and the insensitivity of his world had impacted not just Lena, but her family. "No, little one," Amir said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am not the man who made her sad. I want to help. Can you forgive me?" Yusuf's gaze flickered, suspicion still evident, but curiosity and hope now mingled in his eyes. "Why would you help us?" he asked. "You're rich. You have everything. Why care about us?" Amir knelt beside the boy's bed, his expensive suit incongruous with the small, simple hospital room. "Because sometimes having everything doesn't mean we are whole. You see, I forgot something very important once. I forgot how to care, how to see what truly matters." His eyes softened as he looked at Yusuf. "Your sister," she reminded me. Tears welled in Amir's eyes, though he blinked quickly to hide them. "I've watched her sacrifice for you every day. I've seen her courage, her heart, and her love. And I realize now she shouldn't have to carry all this alone. I will make sure you get the care you need. Not for show, not to impress anyone, but because it is the right thing to do." Yusuf's small hand reached toward Amir, hesitant but trusting. Promise my sister won't be sad anymore," he whispered. Amir's throat tightened. "I promise," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I will take care of you both, I swear it. You don't have to worry anymore." Back at the hotel, Amir remained quietly in thought, planning his next steps. He would not flaunt his wealth, nor make a spectacle of his generosity. Lena had earned his respect, and he wanted to honor that respect in most meaningful way possible. He would ensure that Yusuf received treatment, that Lena could focus on her family without fear, and that the sacrifices she bore would be eased, silently, privately, and with dignity. Later that evening, Amir returned to the ballroom briefly, just long enough to glance at Lena from across the room. She was serving guests with her usual poise, unaware that her struggle had been seen, her pain acknowledged. His eyes softened. This woman, who had stood tall in the face of insult, who had protected him while protecting her own principles, was extraordinary. And now Amir understood something deeper. True power was not in wealth or dominance. It was in empathy, action, and the courage to do what is right. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "She has taught me more than anyone ever has, and now is my turn to repay that lesson." 2 weeks had passed since Amir had visited Yusuf in the hospital. During that time, Lena continued her shifts at the Lux Meridian Hotel, juggling trays and orders, yet her heart carried a quiet weight of hope and curiosity. She noticed subtle changes, the hospital staff whispering about unexpected donations, the nurses' amazed glances at her brother's suddenly upgraded care. but she had no idea who was behind it. She assumed it was another kind-hearted benefactor or a late government grant. She never expected the truth. That evening, Amir requested a private meeting. Lena felt the familiar tightness in her chest as she entered the suite. The faint scent of oud and sandalwood greeted her, but it was his expression that caught her off guard. His eyes were softer than before, yet they carried a depth of emotion that stunned her. In his hand, he held a small envelope, sealed delicately with a simple golden sticker. "This is for you," he said, his voice quiet, but his gaze unwavering. "Open it." Lena hesitated, then took the envelope carefully, breaking the seal. Inside, she found a note in elegant, precise handwriting. "For the woman who reminded me of my mother." Her breath caught. Beneath it, she found documents confirming that Yusuf's full treatment had been paid in full, including long-term care and specialized therapy she hadn't even dared to hope for. Her fingers trembled as she read, and for a moment, tears blurred her vision. She had spent years sacrificing everything, struggling to keep her brother alive, and now, someone had lifted that weight silently, without fanfare, without expectation. I don't know what to say," Lena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Amir stepped closer, carefully, almost nervously. "You don't need to say anything," he said softly. "I only want you to know. I am sorry. For the insult. For not seeing you before tonight. For the arrogance I carried like armor." Lena shook her head, tears falling freely now, but not in anger. "You don't understand. You've already given more than I could ever imagine," she said. Her words wavered, but her gratitude shone brighter than any jewel in his vast collection. "You've given my brother life and me hope." Amir swallowed hard, his own eyes glistening. He reached out, gently placing a hand on hers. "You translated my words once," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But tonight, you translated my heart. You reminded me of what I had forgotten, what truly matters. Courage, love, and humanity. You have given me the greatest lesson of my life." Lena felt her heart swell, a warmth spreading through her chest as the weight of years of struggle began to lift. She could see now more than ever the man behind the billionaire facade, a man capable of humility, growth, and kindness. After a long pause, Amir smiled faintly. "And if you are willing, I would still like you to accept the position I offered. As my personal translator, but also as a confidant, someone whose voice and heart I trust. Your brother's care is secure, but I want you to have the freedom to live your own life, too." Lena hesitated, then nodded slowly, a smile breaking through her tears. I accept. Not for wealth, not for status, but because it means I can continue to protect my brother while making a difference for others. And because I trust you." Amir's smile widened, a rare, genuine expression that illuminated his entire face. For the first time, the billionaire seemed less a figure of power and more a human capable of love, gratitude, and empathy. Weeks later, the three of them, Amir, Lena, and Yusuf, sat together at a quiet, elegant restaurant celebrating Yusuf's progress and recovery. The boy, bright-eyed and full of laughter, had been cleared to leave the hospital indefinitely, thanks to the treatments that would now continue without interruption. He looked at Amir with awe and gratitude. "Thank you, sir," he said shyly, "for helping me and my sister." Amir reached out and ruffled the boy's hair gently. "No, Yusuf," he said softly, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "The true thanks belongs to your sister. She taught me more about life, love, and courage than I ever could have learned on my own." Lena reached for Amir's hand, squeezing it lightly. "And you," she whispered, "taught me that even the strongest heart can grow softer and the richest life isn't measured in wealth, but in humanity." Yusuf giggled, leaning into his sister's side. "Sometimes," he said, his voice earnest and wise beyond his years, "the richest man in the room is the one who finally remembers how to be human." Amir nodded, eyes glistening, looking at Lena, and then at Yusuf. "You are both right," he said quietly. "And I am grateful, more than I can ever say." The three of them sat together, sharing laughter, warmth, and the kind of quiet joy that only comes when burdens are lifted and hearts are healed. Outside, the city lights sparkled, indifferent to the small, profound moments of transformation that had taken place within a modest restaurant. But inside, a billionaire had learned to feel again, a young woman had found security and recognition, and a little boy had been given a chance to grow up healthy, loved, and safe. It was a night of redemption, gratitude, and hope, a reminder that sometimes, even in most unlikely places, humanity can flourish.